Margo, you already on mute, so you don't get caught for watching TikToks again.
Okay. Ha ha ha.
Excuse me, YouTube Shorts.
Someone makes one mistake and it's held over their heads for
it was the climax of Wanderhome.
I'm sorry.
Look, beautiful moment.
Hey, that's allowed. There's a provision for that in the rule book.
See, we were testing the rules.
Yeah,
we were throwing ourselves against the cage. Yeah.
The fact that there's like no violence was tested.
Girls with TikTok open. Yeah. We've got Subway Surfers going.
Yeah, clearly. Funny moments.
Reddit, am I the asshole posts being read out loud. I think that more games should be like, here's a clause for when your players get bored at the table and start scrolling on their phone.
I also just think like Wanderhome's kind of a sleepy ass game. I don't know. It's
gorgeous.
It's a good time. I've had too much coffee in the morning. The way I play Wanderhome is really different from other rulebooks. I when I'm at cons and like to survive at a convention for me requires me to like take a good amount of my prescription ADHD medications and drink a lot of caffeine, and I will run. I can bang out a full session of Wanderhome in an hour and a half, and that includes character creation. Right?
Oh.
Like I'm at the point where I'm just like boom, 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 and that shit does not look the way the rulebook does. That's some like fucking frothing at the bit, clutching the sides of my Wanderhome at full throttle. And if I'm not running it that way, I get kind of bored. I don't know. I get it. I get the sleepy.
Anisha's shaking right now.
And he's just like, I wish that were me.
Unfathomable. We'll ask questions about that. You can take notes.
I have a problem where I think I tend to I also just run games very fast in general. Like Eusebus for me is like a 30 to 45 minute per chapter. And like I've had people be like, that's crazy. It takes like me 3 hours to play a thing. I'm like, I don't relate. I want to have somebody tell me it took them 4 hours to like set up, like to go through character creation for Sleepaway, which like completely threw me off because whenever I get a BOB pick list, I'm just like boom, 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 boom. I don't know, like I just like pick shit. People like deliberate. People like think them through, and not me. I just go like, I just call like if it takes me more than a minute to fill out a BOB sheet, I'm not having a good time.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do the episode intro.
And now we start.
This is such I'll take that and I'll move it after we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
There's good stuff here.
This was one of the clips you asked about for like TikTok or whatever.
Exactly. That Margo can watch while we're recording it. I'm sorry.
Girl.
I'm trying. It won't be a hostile environment.
Found the clip from Jamais Vu, it was like interesting.
A recurring theme.
Right. All right.
What clip? Oh, okay.
I'll send it to you.
We have to lock in.
Things are getting kind of tense. This is Wanderhome, guys.
You're right.
Friendly camaraderie.
Post-war.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Read Play Game, where we look at tabletop role-playing games from every side of the table. Today we are joined by Dre...
Wait, nailed it in one.
The way I just want to say it because I don't know. I'm sure that he'll say it later. The way that Anish has been like obsessed with you for years, and now this is how we are putting our.
No. I hope you realize that this is us, and I fully love us for that.
No, don't worry. You're making a good first impression. However, I will say you did name maybe the worst person you could have botched. Political climate. I think I'd rather you just have called me a slayer, Jess.
It's okay.
Hey guys,
lock in.
All right.
You're like, I will be quitting.
Yeah, I'll be my letter of resignation. I'm going to be writing it in the questions document while we're doing this recording. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Read Play Game, where we look at tabletop role-playing games from every side of the table. Today we are joined by Jay Dragon, designer of Wanderhome. Jay, we are so excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Jay. I'm the editorial director at Possum Creek Games and the lead game designer at Steve Jackson Games. I'm also relevantly the game designer of Wanderhome. So that's what I'm here talking about. That's what happened.
Woo!
Yippee.
We had such a fun time. I'm trying to, because fun, I don't think really encapsulates the experience of playing Wanderhome.
It was profound.
Profound.
Very profound.
Multiple of us cried. Like, it was a gorgeous, gorgeous game to play. And really, really evocative and everything. And Anish did a really excellent job, I think, leading us through that experience. He was the only one who had played it before, so the rest of us were fresh.
I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, good, correct, perfect.
I'm curious, in addition to, I mean, you already kind of gave a little overview of what you do, but if you wanted to add any more or elaborate about what drew you into the world of game design in the first place, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, so I got my start at a LARP summer camp when I was a teenager, the Wayfinder Experience in upstate New York, where I was running LARPs both kind of at the camp and like in my friends' backyards.
Hey.
For like 60 kids at a time. So it was a very like a friend of mine once said it was like doing ketamine before getting drunk in terms of I would run LARPs. I did that for almost a decade before I ever touched a tabletop RPG. At which point, like, it took me a while to like tabletop RPGs. And then finally, once they did click, it was like, while I was taking a medical break from college, and I finally like played some games. I played 10 Candles, and I was like, oh, I get it. This is the point. This is what we're going for. And I just got really deep into game design. I dropped out of college in 2019. I was homeless. And Itch.io, like that was right during the Itch.io explosion, kind of when that first time came onto the scene, and it was very critical for me. And then Wanderhome kind of being the big, like, I'd been publishing games for like a year at that point. We weren't expecting it to be as much of a success as it was. It was life-changing, But yeah, I think Wanderhome kind of comes out of like, Wanderhome makes sense both in the context of like, I wrote it at a very like bleak time in my life, and also I wrote it, it was heavily informed by March through June 2020. So if you remember that time period, right, the 1-2 punch of the pandemic and the George Floyd protests really were like, okay, I need to fucking make something about this. And yeah, that's kind of what got me.
The fact it doesn't have any kind of combat, I'm probably the least experienced of the role play gamers, and like had pretty much only played like D&D and the big ones. So that was a really neat element of Wanderhome specifically, is that it's like you have to problem solve, and you also like know that is not a danger that your character will be in.
Yes, absolutely. It's a very interesting experience to run Wanderhome for people who are used to D&D.
Yeah.
Create circumstances where in D&D, all the signs of combat approaching are there, right? Like I ran at a con recently where they went and they talked to an ancient dragon underneath a bridge, and like all the signs were there, right? Like you've got like, oh, you know, it's like building up the heart, the tension, you know, there's a big monster on the bridge, there's the anxiety, there's the uncertainty. And I remember there was a moment when like one of the players was going in prepping for a fight. Like they were like, and then there was like a moment they were like, well, wait, there cannot be a fight. And like it changed fundamentally how they engaged with the rest of the scene. And it was so interesting to like see that moment in their eyes. They were like, oh, wait, I'm doing this wrong because this isn't going to be a fight, which is kind of the point of Wanderhome, is that like when violence is so loud, it drowns out every other mode of relating with people, right? Like, if you know, it doesn't matter really like how we feel about each other if the world's ending, right? Like when there's this kind of like, when the stakes get higher and higher and higher, the small things completely flatten out, because the small things are only audible, they're only perceptible if you remove it's like in film when like there's a big bright source of light that completely washes out every other part of the shot. It's like you need, if you take that away, you're able to appreciate the finer degrees of subtlety there. And that to me is really, that's kind of the thing that I'm really interested in, or that I have been historically very interested in as a game designer, is like finding those little degrees of subtlety and like like, okay, well, if we get combat out of the way, if we make everything really low stakes, what actually starts to matter? What do we actually start?
Yeah.
What was really interesting too is we had a character that was like a veteran.
That's me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so it's like there's no fighting, but you can die, right?
It's
Yeah.
not
You can
that
kill,
you can
right?
kill.
You could kill.
We have a question
veteran?
specifically
Oh, fuck.
talking about this, but that blog post about the cage,
Yeah.
so like I felt that in the
Wait,
whole
you say
time.
You say the name of my blog post.
What is it? It's the rules are a cage and I'm a puppy girl.
Yeah, that one.
Incredible. Because there was a moment where I almost, like, I was considering it, and then I was like, oh,
Yeah.
it's such
saw-
a fun way to play with really hard like, as someone who likes using role play games to explore, like, I've had personal experiences with trauma and, like, processing that. Like, what a juicy playbook.
There was a great post I saw recently on Tumblr about Disco Elysium. That was someone expressing that when they first started playing, they were really surprised that Disco Elysium doesn't have an addiction mechanic, right? That, like, in fact, cigarettes, alcohol, that stuff, its benefits outweigh its costs. Mechanically, there are no real cost, and the benefit is huge. They're like, oh, there's no real addiction mechanic. There's no downside. And then in the late game, they're like smoking a pack of cigarettes and drinking 3 bottles of whiskey before they do any check. And they're like, oh, there is a downside. There is a mechanic. It's player facing. And I think that is so brilliant because that's also really what I'm interested in with the veteran, which is like, okay, if like, what are the like what is violence, right? Like, what does it mean to be the one person in a world without violence who meaningfully, deeply understands the way in which violence can be used, right? That to be the veteran means that you understand in a way that no one else here does. It's like knowing, it's like when you get in a car accident or something else that's horrible and traumatic happens to you. It's like suddenly you're out in the world and everyone else is driving around in cars and they're all treating it like it's normal. And you're over here being like, okay, but I know that this thing can ruin my life. And I'm like the only one who knows that. I'm like, are you all crazy? Are you all like delusional? Because I'm the one, you're all treating me like I'm crazy, but I'm the one who like it knows that it can kill. You're all just doing things. I can kill. I've got that. I've got the sword at my head. And so it's like, okay, well, how do you go about being a normal person knowing that, right? Like, how do you like reconcile that feeling? Because that feeling is like overwhelming. It's very it makes it impossible to relate to other people normally if you allow like if the way in which you engage with every single person you talk to is being like, oh, but should I use my sword that cannot be unsheathed to fucking murk their ass, right? Like it's a really horrible way to relate to every single person you talk to. But it's kind of the way the game sets you up to relate to them. And so it puts you in a really interesting spot to like try and figure out, well, how do I still go about caring for people knowing as I do that I can use my sword in this way? How do I get to the point where I forget that this is the thing, and how do I set it down, and how do I stop caring about it?
And I love too that tension of like you can forget it and be in a really good place, and then something happens and you feel it on your hip again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. It reminds you. Yeah, it triggers it. Like it on the player side, it triggers you, right? Like in a way that like it's really hard to, I think, like elegantly mechanize triggering, because triggers like the really the way people try to do it is just dog shit. Like it's very hard to have a good elegant way to implement that. And so having a thing that is like, not to toot my own horn, but like here's a character who has a little thing on the character sheet that changes the way they relate to every single person as long as they remember it's there, and then like is well set up to forget about it and then be reminded of it and then like, think about it again. Yeah. I think that's
like,
pretty
like scanning your sheet, like, oh, what can I do in this situation? Oh,
yeah.
Oh, I can do
no one else has a tool like that, because everyone else's tools are like, oh, well, you can like ask an innocent question, or you can, come up with a good, those sorts of things. And the veteran has 6 plays that are not really especially useful. They're all things like drum on the pommel of your blade, or like practice a craft you're not very good at. And then, there's one that for sure will deal with this problem, right? Like hey, that'll work, right? It will not solve any long-term problems,
Yeah.
but like you could
And
do it.
no role affiliated. It's just like you do it.
You do it.
can
They're
do
dead.
that.
They're dead. They're move on, right? Keep. And you know what's weird is, and I hope that this is not taken as a challenge, because I feel like I'm going to say this. I'm going to have someone be like, oh, well, the next time I play, I'm going to steer. But like, I've never heard of someone
Who
doing.
actually does it?
Yeah, and I think that that's really good. Like, I think it would be like, I don't want that to be like a challenge for someone to be like, well, I'm going to go and play Wanderhome and try and get it every chance I get, because I don't think it's. I think it is. I think it's a good thing, and maybe a better testament to people's goals when playing than I expected, that no one has done it. But I think it is for the best that it is not a thing that has come up during play. But I think it is interesting that I've never actually had someone be like, and I've done it.
And that's really fun, because there was, when we discussed the game afterwards, there was a moment where I was like, did you guys realize how close I was to doing it in this one situation? And nobody did. So it was all like internal conflict. It was great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's sort of asymmetrical experience between every individual player, because like while it was still part of the narrative, it wasn't a part of a narrative that we noticed from our perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the veteran is not essential to playing Wanderhome. I think like you can have a group of Wanderhome without the veteran. But I do think that for me, the thematic stuff I'm most interested in with Wanderhome encourages there being a veteran at the table. And I kind of think of the veteran as a little bit like, increasingly as I step further and further away from the game and like I grow older, I think of the veteran a lot like a guide, where it's like you've got a guide at the table and you've got a veteran at the table, and neither of those are essential roles. But having, whether or not there is a guide at the table, dramatically changes how like the mechanical tenor of the game. And this is also true about whether or not there's a veteran at the table. So there's a little bit like I don't know if any of you know the game The Rock of Bahamut by Vincent Baker, but it's got a little bit of that. The Rock of Bahamut is a game where there's a GM, there's players, and then there's one player who's the Rock of Bahamut. And the game is set in this space empire ruled over by this intergalactic tyrant named the Rock of Bahamut. And every single other player is a serf within that empire. And they all go around, they do a little scene, a little vignette of their lives under the empire. And then the Rock of Bahamut does whatever he wants, and like maybe casually like issues an edict that causes their entire family to die, right? Maybe like bombs their home and sends them off to war, or like throws their planet into a black hole or whatever. But like one player's power and agency and scope is so much vaster than every other player's in the game. In a way that like the game is built around. It's very smart, but it's in that way where they're separate from the GM. It's not like, oh, it's the GM is the Rock of Bahamut. It's that there's the players and the Rock, and in that you get an interesting triangulation that happens that is different than the veteran, because the veteran's not the Rock of Bahamut. But I think that the tenor of the game changes whether or not there's a veteran, and the veteran kind of serves as like a third point in this triangulation.
And we definitely felt that, because Emma's character, like, I mean, our characters were kind of much younger and naive, or at least Tori and my characters were. Like I literally played the
Ragamuffin.
The Ragamuffin, yeah. And so you became sort of a de facto parent of that situation, and you were like going through different each place we went, and you were like, could this be a loving home for you? Could this be and I was just kind of like experiencing the world, and I feel like you were, I don't know, it was really interesting to see how those two things interacted. I guess maybe I'm specifically thinking with our characters, but I do think that you were kind of a force for the whole group.
I think Anish has a good question about playbooks.
Yeah,
we're on that topic.
We're talking about how well the playbooks kind of mesh together in that way. And I'll refer back to this blog post again in 2021 that you wrote about developing those playbooks, where you kind of build out one character at a time and see where it goes. I'm curious what the experience was like designing that first playbook, The Dancer, and essentially how you conquered the blank Google Doc.
Yeah, with Wanderhome, I'll tell you that Wanderhome's design process is really tied to The Dancer, because it was like, it's April 2020. I've got a lot of sketches in my notebook about various ideas around a low combat a combat-free, journey-inspired PBTA game, and it's like post-apocalyptic, and it's very like if you know the video game Journey, like it'd be like us little guys, long cloak. And I'm sitting at the dock outside my house because I lived in a cute little house on the creek at the time. There's actually an illustration of the location in the back of Wanderhome. There's like a cute little drawing of me and Grubby as Possum and a raccoon, and you can that's where I was living at the time. And I was sitting back there and I was feeling a tremendous state of despair at the way the world was. And I was thinking about what it would be like to be on a boat looking at the land instead of being on the land looking at a boat. Because when you're on a boat and you're looking out at the world, your perspective on the world changes. That it changes how you sit with things. And so I was thinking about games that change your perspective. And I'd been talking to my friend Maria Mison a lot, and I another friend as well who had been talking to a lot. We've been talking a lot about dancing as a way of severing ego, like dancing as a way of being wholly present in your world without the conscious thing getting in the way. And so I just kind of started writing down like dances, and then I was like, oh, I don't really like this as a game about people in cloaks, and I really don't like this as PBTA because PBTA, it's like, well, what's failure? What's success?
Would you define that for our listeners?
PBTA. Powered by the apocalypse.
Sorry. Oh my God. Yeah. Powered by the apocalypse. So Apocalypse World, Monster Hearts, Underhill Hills. There are others that are worse. World, that one's a bad one. But failure, success with a cost, success. And it has a wide range of success and failure. And I realized that I actually don't care that much about extremely negative success. Extremely negative failure, extremely high success. That I actually wanted a game that had a rather narrow band of what success and failure looked like. And I also didn't like it as post-apocalyptic because it just felt a little too bleak in April 2020. And so my friend at the time had a persona that was a monkey. And so I was thinking about monkeys, thinking about dancing. And then Wanderhome, like that's where the Dancer came out of. The Dancer was that first Wanderhome playbook that really just came out of like I think just really thinking about like, well, what does it mean to get like to escape the troubles of the world, not through dissociation, but through extreme association, right? Instead of getting out of my body and like dissociating myself from the reality of what's happening, is there a way I can be so earnest and so present and so with it that that pain is resolved, that like the pain comes about because of a disconnect, and I could flee that disconnect or I could try and unify it. And what does that unification actually require physically? And so I was thinking a lot about dance.
Well, I have a follow-up question. I don't know if you've got
no, just kind
gorgeous.
Of, that's just awesome. That just struck.
Because you mentioned somebody having a fursona. One of my favorite elements is the artwork.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it feels so anthropomorphic, human, but in a way that like I haven't seen before. And so I didn't know, how did you meet that artist, and like how did all that come about?
We worked with a team of artists. My business partner, Ruby, is the art director. And so we worked together very heavily on coming up with kind of the visual language of Wanderhome. We have a little artistic style guide we put together. But one of the big components for it with the animals was we wanted an anthropomorphism that was different from furry. We didn't want to kind of go all in on the furry aesthetic. But we also wanted to kind of break out of, I think, the extremely cutesy, saccharine anthropomorphism that you see in a lot of spaces, which is to say that we looked really hard for an artist who understood that ugly things are also cute, and that or like understood like the way in which like ugly things could be cute. Letty Wilson is the artist who did the illustrations for the playbooks for Wanderhome. And part of what brought us to Letty was they have this one illustration of a blind cave, like a monstrous cave bat. That was really charming. That was a really cute monster. And we were like, oh yeah, you get it. And they had these goblins that were really like ugly and wordy and adorable. And we needed someone who understood like, okay, when making a bat that's cute, you don't take a bat and strip away bat-like qualities until you have like a chibi animal shape. you take a bat and you exaggerate it a little bit to play up like the cute elements that are part of what a bat is, which is to say its weird ass nose and its big ass, its lumpy little face, right? Like you emphasize the parts of it that are kind of like lumpy and weird and gross, which like is really important because like I am a fat woman and I would feel comfortable with a picks like that that like is about like the importance and beauty of the world and then depicts a bunch of like skinny ass little chibi kawaii animal people without regard for like the physical attributes that make them animals. So yeah, that was an important factor. Was we just really looked hard to find an artist who we could really trust that, and Letty is kind of my favorite pick for that in terms of depicting animals where we, you know, like they're not maybe necessarily animals that people always find cute, but like understands what it is about them that is cute without lying about what the animal is.
And I love that I did the full playbook and it has some examples, and then one of them is just like a goofy animal or like a silly animal, something like that.
Yeah, so, just pick whatever animal you want. I don't give a shit, really. It's just the only reason there's even like animals at the beginning, like the only reason there's 4 animals is to start. It's just that you like have a place to start.
Yeah.
Just like people otherwise get like paralyzed. But then I'm like, any animal you tell me is goofy, I will believe you, right? Like I cannot
if it's
imagine
goofy to you, then it's goofy.
Exactly. Yeah. Like
to a guy like me, a goofy movie is just a movie.
that man, that strange dog. Goddamn normal.
I don't know if you. I know Emma sent the art that they made. I don't know if you saw one. Tori's character was a bat in our game as well. We did have a bat.
A Honduran. It's like a yellow bat, and it's got this.
Very long nose.
Noses. Yeah, good, amazing. That rules.
And unfortunately, in my drawing of it, it was very chibi.
Look, here's the thing. Also, is it's like there's a difference between like what people find satisfying as art of their characters / like in my case, who like I can't really draw animals. I kind of just draw a little blob with ears. But like versus like what I needed for the art of the game,
right,
in the book. So that was kind of that important bit of logic as well.
Well, I do remember seeing the list of animals, and it ended up being perfect. I don't know. The animals did seem... The suggested animals fit the playbooks pretty well from what I saw, especially when I was looking through Ragamuffin, and I think a gecko was suggested. And I was like, literally, I was going to do a gecko. I was like, this is... I don't know how we know that geckos are little... I mean, geckos are little ragamuffins.
Yeah,
that's how we know.
They have the little smile.
Exactly. They do. They're so cute.
I agonized over that list for a while. There was a lot of... Because the thing is also there are no repeats amongst the core playbooks, I believe, which was a bitch.
I'm sure. There's only so many animals.
Well, there's also for all the sets of 4 animals, at least one of them is a bird, and at least one of them is not at least 2 are not mammals. For birds, reptiles, and amphibians, and that's hard. That's really hard to have like. I don't know, however many distinctive lizard names. There's not that many lizards I've learned, especially ones that are like one word, because I didn't want to put like Komodo dragon. There was a whole process. There was a whole process to figuring out the animal list, and it took me forever. So I'm glad that you liked them, because I really agonized.
It was great. It was like the perfect amount of structure and creative liberty. And then maybe I should already know this. I don't know. My colleagues have done research and like articles or whatever. How did you come up with the world name?
Haith? The Haith was a combo of hearth and the Welsh word hereth, which means like heart, like home, like comfort. And also I wanted a word that had a kind of an old English quality to it. Old English etymologically derived words in English are ones we associate with home and also like lower class folk, and kind of has like a more like country quality. It's like, you know, I didn't want a word that sounded like Latin or whatever, like, you know, Almoria or something, because like, no, that's not what, you know, this is a place of farmers. This is not a place of kings and emperors, which is where Latin and French derived words in English kind of emerge more from. So There was a little bit of etymological wordplay and a little bit of, finding the right combination.
Like mouthfeel. I love that that it means comfort, because our experience, I touched on this before, was very much like those tools at the beginning that are like, talk about what type of game you want to play. We leaned very much into, we are going to be playing through an exploration of the effects of trauma on different characters and how they that is what we are going to be doing. And those journeying tools that are built in are really, really interesting and very intuitive, in that like sometimes you use them without realizing that you're using them. What did developing those phrases look like? How did you like hone in on those tools?
So I've had people tell me, they're like, oh my God, the journeying tools are just common sense. And I'm like, yeah, that's like the point. Like, I don't consciously use them when I play, because I just intuitively use them when I play. But like functionally, my thinking was that if I'm going to teach people how to communicate with each other, I'm going to teach them how to communicate with each other, even if it's stuff that, if you've been playing for a long time, might come more naturally. But like, I just, it's good to have it written down, right? Like,
right.
Yeah. Especially, I feel like with people that are coming from games like Dungeons and Dragons, or just other games where there's more of that like violent PvP.
Yeah, we live in a society that makes it really hard for us to communicate with each other, right? Like, it's just really difficult for us to like lower our pretenses and trust that everyone's got our best interests at heart, and how to communicate that we need what we need from each other, right? Like, we do not live in a high trust society. We do not live in a society that incentivizes trust in the United States. And with the journeying tools, yeah, I mean, so part of it came out of Rebo Yeager's, what was it called? He made a safety tool system that I think is the like TV remote system that like uses play, pause, flash forward, and rewind. And I was thinking about kind of how those functions work, and also where its limitations are. And so I was really interested in kind of like building that out towards, okay, what is kind of like the vocabulary for communicating with each other? If I was to give each player a set of moves the way I give each character, what would those moves actually, what would I want those to be in terms of like communicating? And so there's a mix of the big thing. There's a notion in RPGs called the spotlight, which is the idea of like kind of who's got the focus and who's, like passing that focus. And so they're all built around the spotlight to me. So there's ones that say, hey, I've had the spotlight for a while, I'm going to pass it over to you. There's ones that say, hey, I haven't had the spotlight for a while, can I have it? There's ones that's, hey, I think you haven't had the spotlight in a while, right? There's like thinking about like, how do you direct the group's attention towards each other? How do I have a combination of tools that proactively ask for that and make it easier to pass it on to others? And then a few that are like, like, no, right? Hold on, right? Like, pause, stop, like things that can take control. And then kind of bundling that all up in the metaphor of the journey itself, right? That at the end of the day, that like these are also in some sense a diegetic tool, that this is like about like this is a game about going on a journey together more than it is about kind of anything else. And so these are tools that you can kind of use in any sphere of what that journey is.
Anish and I were talking last night, and we talked about it a little bit before. Your very recent blog post about the palette grid safety tool that you're working on, that kind of blew my mind. When you take a look back at Wanderhome, especially like with these intense discussions of trauma, does that like figuring out that system now, does that change how you would have like approached any writing discussing safety, or how you would recommend people approach the game?
That's an interesting question. I wrote Wanderhome when I was 22 and 23. I have no idea how old any of you are. Maybe that is a normal age for y'all. For me, it's young.
That's young.
Okay,
it's young.
Cool. Great. Thank God. Okay. I was looking at like, I have no idea how old this group is.
We all got that one friend who's 27.
That made me go like, I don't know.
Editor's note: since recording this episode, Tori has turned 28.
I've been talking to children. I have no clue. No. Never know these days. But with Wanderhome, so I wrote it when I was young, right? Like, And so like Wanderhome, I Wanderhome for me at the end of the day, it exists. It's there. It's out there in the world. The book is complete. I think about what I like expansions, what I like want to put on top of it. There's all that. The text is done. The text is I don't even I think about right now what I would change about it. Besides like it annoys me that it says some things you can always do. I think I would change that to you may always. That's like
sure.
like I'm gonna do with that's the only red line that I'm like, I hate the repetition of the word thing in that book. But regardless.
Just like secretly re-upload it so all
Yeah,
the PDFs change across the
the thing
board.
that stops me is that my business partner is like, you're insane. And I'm like, I know I have OCD. I know I literally have OCD. That's not the point. But with Wanderhome, it's like the big thing for me is that I increasingly am playing very high trust games, right? I played a game recently of Bluebeard's Bride with a group of friends where it was a group of all trans women, and we played it about transmisogyny, which is to say that there was a moment where my character was sexually assaulted by an endocrinologist in a doctor's office, like is part of the process of trying to get on hormones. Like it was a very intense, full throttle, dark game. And those are the kinds of experiences I've been chasing the past year, which is very different from Wander, right? Like very, very, in many ways, extremely different. And I think that Wanderhome's journeying tools are still how I would approach that conversation in for a game like that. I think my tastes and my desires increasingly drift away. And like I think that Wanderhome's like calibration questions, like are we looking for something cozy or are we looking for something dark, right? That's the palette grid kind of in a proto form. Kind of me thinking about the palette grid as like a series of sliders, kind of trying to get there. But I find myself getting drawn increasingly towards darker and more intense, more high trust experiences. Wanderhome is a game that I made that can take a low trust group and help them trust each other more, right? That like using the tools of Wanderhome, you can build trust within a group who maybe trust each other a little bit, but doesn't know each other that well. And I think more and more I've been looking for play that is more in the deep end of the pool. That kind of starts in the deep end of the pool. That's like, okay, you've already played Wanderhome. You already know how to trust each other. Let's go, now that you've built that foundation, let's go do the dark stuff. But like, I think you can't get there without first playing Wanderhome, right? And I'm not really, I think that I've done the work that I wanted to do with Wanderhome and also with Eusebius Bed and Breakfast in terms of bridging that gap from the shallow end to the deep end. And now a lot of my work is concerned with, well, what's happening in the deep end of play, but also like, I think with Wanderhome is doing Wanderhome's doing a different function, right? Like I wouldn't want to use the palette grid. I wouldn't want to use those kind of tools, like high trust tools for Wanderhome, unless I was looking to do really high trust stuff with Wanderhome, right? If we wanted to take Wanderhome and make it about, I don't know, thinking about a refugee crisis and thinking about homelessness in a very visceral and deep, dark, and heavy way. First off, I think maybe Wanderhome's not the best pick for that, but also I think that, like, yeah, at that point, probably I'd bring in the palette grid, but like, I'm not normally used to do that. That's kind of the point.
Yeah, that's. I think that's. I was actually the other day. I wrote a Twitter thread about this. I think specifically in reference to we played a game called Goblin Errands. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
I don't have.
It's a cute little like no prep game.
So fun, like a zine.
Very fun
game, really.
Where you like play as goblins trying to complete a errand in the human world, and. I was both in the context of that and this game, which I think we were also playing at the time when I wrote it. I was just kind of lamenting about the fact that D&D D&D is the most popular tabletop role playing game system and most people's introduction to it. Which you can go on critiquing D&D and especially Wizards of the Coast forever, and that there's very valid reasons to do it. But especially the fact that it, I think, frames people's way of interacting with games in a very specific way, so that when you do come, I essentially wish Wanderhome was something like that, because I think that Wanderhome would be a great place. Was something that I wish Wanderhome was one of the most like as popular as D&D, more so that more people would start with it, and then that could branch into something like D&D or whatever anyone wants to play, just when they've got that vocabulary, because I think we can all agree D&D is not the best starting place for any of that.
Especially with that idea of building trust. For
Yeah.
sure.
I love that you talk about games and situations in terms of how much trust does this require. I don't think I've heard it described that way before.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it a lot. I might do a blog post about it soon because I've been thinking about it a lot, because I do think that there's a weird thing that happens with it was previous. So I think con culture and actual play culture both
Yes.
create different environments around trust that are pretty different from home games, right? Like if I'm playing with a group of friends in my living room and we're not recording it versus we are recording it, those are two very different levels of trust, and dramatically change how we both go about playing the game and how we go about like relating to the game. That it's interesting to me, I think, how people acknowledge this to be the case, but like Emily Friedman is doing she's doing some work on this subject. I know that, but there's not really that much work, I think, in terms of like what is actually happening there. Or like with cons, for example, where it's like if I get a group of strangers together for a con, that's a very different experience than a home game. And that's like you need very different tools for that. There are in fact some games where it's like I would not play Monster Hearts with a group
Yes.
at a con. I would not play Bluebeard's Bride on stream. I would I would not play, there are games I would not play Praise the Hawkmoth King on stream. Good God, I think there's very different levels of comfort there.
What's the game we were playing that mentioned that in the rules of it? Was it Kids on Bikes that said when you're setting sort of the boundaries that everyone has and like both with safety tools and stuff like that, keep in mind not only the people involved, but like your surroundings, because if you're going to like tackle very complicated things like homophobia, racism, and or like very like
Heavy topics.
Heavy topics, that's the word. That can be, something that your players want to explore in a private space, or even, on an actual play where you're all on board with it. But like at a con, somebody could be walking by and hear you say something that really is either upsetting or just in the context of that con situation is not going to be just, there's context for every environment in which you play things, which is very true.
Yeah. Well, and then also the flip side, of course, being that there are certain environments which kind of limit one's ability to engage in certain kinds of deep play, right? Like, for example, the story that I told earlier about Bluebeard's Bride was deeply cathartic and valuable for me. It was a really, world-changing experience in a lot of ways in terms of how I relate to play and also how I conceptualize being a trans woman. And I don't think I could have had that play on. I could not have had that play on stream, right? That would have been impossible. And so I think that as we live in an age that increasingly seeks to commercialize every second of our free time, we have to think about what happens when we commercialize that free time, right? Like what does do to our play, right? And like there is a reason why there have been arguments made at various points that play for a profit incentive isn't play, right? That if you're playing a game for money, if you're getting paid to play a game, if you are trying to win because winning earns you more money, those mean that you are not able to play the game in the way that is like play. You're not playing in a true sense. You are competing, or you are
performing in many
performing. Yeah. You're like there's a different mode of thing happening to that game, but it's not necessarily play. And I don't know if I buy that. Complicated feeling. Really could go into the weeds on that, but I think people have convinced me that I don't think that's the case. But I do think there's an argument to be made, and the reason for that is because play with a financial incentive. You can just play.
Good thing we don't make any money.
Yeah, right? You're really in it for the love of the game here. Except, I was going to say that I feel that even here, where like, despite the fact that we're not profiting necessarily, despite the fact that this eats into our time, we have fun. But I do feel myself motivated by factors like, someone will do something in the game and my mind will immediately be like, oh, that'll be a great promo clip. Or like,
gotta clip that, yeah.
Or like, we have to get a good promo clip in this so that we can post it. And it's like, maybe and also like sometimes we'll be playing a game and like, we have to get it within this allotted time so that, it fits our whatever structure. And there's been a lot of friction with that sometimes where I just kind of have to step back and be like, you know what? I think that especially for this podcast, it's for a lot of reasons, but not for profit. So it's like we should do it with a level of artistic integrity that is going to feel satisfying for us. Because if it's not satisfying for us, what's the point?
Yeah,
but it's much more complicated.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's a good way to put it. It's that like if like I know that I like to talk about marketing brain as like one of the editors I let into the room, right? Where it's I make a work of art and then I let my inner marketer come in and tell me how to make it more profitable. But my marketer is not allowed to touch it until after the art is done, right? You're not allowed in until the moment, like once the art is done, sure, come on it. In the same way that that's when I let the proofreader and the art director and all the other kind of like little people who want to give me opinions on the art, that's when I let them all come in and start critiquing it and picking it apart. But like while the art is being made, they're not let in the kitchen, right? They're allowed to examine it afterwards. I think that is an important, like you have to kind of figure out your relationship to the art, I think, as a practice, right? Even beyond the art as a like as a thing you love, it's good to also know, like, I don't know, like what is it, what does the success look like to you, right? And is that success financial? I mean, we all want it to be financial, right? And like, who am I to talk? I'm the one who makes money on my games, right? Like, I'm the sellout, right? Like, but like, there is a level of which, like, you know, is to sell out, right? Like, I think that there were choices I could have made with Wanderhome that would have made it more profitable, right? Like, I could have made the D&D 5e Wanderhome, and we joke that if we ever do a 5e compatible Wanderhome, that's the cue for all of our fans to avoid the backing that Kickstarter. We're gonna scam. That's the scam. If we do the 5e Wanderhome, we're just pulling as much money as we can and we're fucking off.
That's the rent is due, and exactly, you need to, yeah.
That's the we've sold out. Do not expect us to actually follow through on this. So like I feel like you gotta have a sense of what those limits are.
I think it's great.
I do want to be mindful of your time. Do we have a question we're really excited about that we want to bring out?
Yeah, I know Margot does.
Yeah, this is kind of a question. We were talking earlier about, like different games and game design and how that ties in. One of the things I liked about Wanderhome is I think the way you define success, like in terms of like being able to successfully do something, there's the token system and things like that. And I think tying that in with like just designing a game, like for like new TTRPG makers, whether it be like people trying to make a game similar to this or just anything, like what resources would you recommend to people starting out trying to look to make something and collaborate with others?
It's almost like, I mean, there's so many resources, almost like but there's so many scattered resources. There's no one-stop shop, which I think is probably for the best of being a folk hobby, right? But I think read lots of games, play lots of games, be opinionated about games is a really important thing to cultivate within yourself, is to play a game and go, how did this game fail me? And to know, of course, when you play a game, you're going to have a different experience than what maybe the author intended, because it's a process of interpolation. But I think it's a helpful skill to self-cultivate, to be a critic, right? To have that criticism in terms of like, make things, right? Just make little things, and just like, we are very good at working out our starting muscles, and then we're really bad at working out our finishing muscles. And so I really recommend make little things that you can finish, not because a one-page RPG is easier than a 500-page RPG. I would say, in fact, that they are, per page, a one-page RPG is much harder. But I also think a one-page RPG is much more finishable than a 500-page RPG. And finishing an RPG is a skill that you need practice on. Just like going, like, as a creative, you probably have good practice starting things, but you probably don't have good practice finishing things.
Yes.
Why are you yelling? That makes so much sense. I am hearing that like deafeningly over here.
I'm sure.
Spitting.
Resources, read blogs, read especially. I love in Dream Askew and Dream Apart, Avery Alder has advice on how to write your own Dream Askew Belonging Outside Belonging game. that was really critical for me when writing Sleepaway and Wanderhome. Read blogs. There's a lot of blog posts out there. Read blogs, and then if you disagree with them, figure out why, and then write a blog explaining why you disagree with them. That's great.
Yeah.
That make it. Just make things. Make little things that you actually finish. that alone will make you 99% more capable than most people trying to do it. Including us.
I'm taking so much language from this. The idea of like a high trust game, work out your finishing muscles, and that being a skill, and like just something to focus on when you start is like, is this something that's finishable?
You can apply that to any creative pursuit at all.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Also, one other thing about games, making games. Play it as soon as possible. When you're making a game, like, literally what I do when I'm working on a game is I will have an idea for a game in the morning. I will write up a draft of it by the early afternoon, and I will have organized a playtest group by the evening. Like,
wow.
Like
you do things incredibly fast.
That's a finishing skill right there.
That is like you stole it. Holy hell.
And the version I playtest is nuts and bolts, right? It is like a pile of notes, and there's some chunks of it being like, just do this normal ways, just like do this normal style. And I'm like, I'm just like, just do it normal style. Just, do it however, doesn't matter right now. Because the goal is just, I need to make sure the game is fun, and I need to have a vision of the game I'm trying to get at as soon as possible. Because when you're writing a game, you're describing a thing that has already happened, which is the game being played. And it's really hard to write a game if you haven't played the game yet. So
I think it probably, that makes a lot of sense, because I feel like if I spent 2 weeks working on a game and then play tested it and was like, all of this sucks, like it would feel pretty bad.
It's the motivating thing. Yeah, exactly. It's just I need to play it as soon as possible. So if it sucks, I've been working on a game for the past 2 years, and the first dozen playtests were bad. Like the first dozen playtests were like, this isn't fun. But there was something about it that I kept chasing, and now it's fun. Now it's a great game. But I had to and I'm glad I got those dozen playtests out in the first 2 weeks of working on the game. Because if that took me a year to have a dozen playtests, it would take me so long to figure out the game wasn't fun, right?
We are rope dropping that game when it comes out. We are first in line gonna play, because you're talking about the wizard game, right?
Yes, 7-part pack.
So excited for that one, especially Jess, who loves.
Yeah, did that one came up on one of our other interviews, right? Who was it that mentioned that? Was that Martin, or was that
Caro? I think.
Caro,
yeah. 7-part pact is it feels like it's every time I bring it up to people, they're like, yeah, I know about that one. I've heard other people very it's being prefigured. It's in the future, and it is moving backwards into the present, at flying speeds, and it's gonna hit us like a freight train when time collides with its preemination.
We're so excited.
I
don't know. I'm not ready for it.
Well, I love these two questions that feel like a nice bow, and I'll give them both to you so you can answer in whatever order you want. You've already named some, but do you have any recommendations for us to play that would be on the podcast? Or if you want to be like, this one, do it and don't record it, that would be cool too.
Oh, please. Yes.
And then the other cute question, just based off the handbook, what are things that you can always do?
Or what can you always do if you'd prefer?
Games you should play and not record. I think you should find time to take Last Train to Bremen is 4 people and not 5, but that's one where I'm like, that's a good getting into that intense zone. I think that finding a game, maybe even Monster Hearts, a game that you're comfortable going more intense on, and make time to play in identify the parts of play that y'all really enjoy, and seek out a game that hits on those notes that you can go full throttle, high octane with, and in an environment where you are able to trust each other to hey, let's communicate really clearly about what we want. Let's not hold back. Let's be really if there's stuff we want to explore, let's use the palette grid, for example. This is the kind of context that the palette grid is for, and play. I think I think just a game that lets you explore the things that you are perhaps interested in, but are either a little worried that the rest of the group isn't interested in, or are like a little worried like would not be like good to record, right? Seek out a game that maybe would be rough on like on actual player games that just don't work well for actual play. And then I mean 7-part pact is that also. 7-part pact is not great for actual play as so far I've found. So maybe that's a good game. Games you should play in general, you should play Under Hollow Hills, by the way. If you have not yet played Under Hollow Hills, that is my favorite Card by the Apocalypse game. You play as a fairy circus. Traveling, and it's a great game for like a 3-shot, 5-shot, because each session you can go put on a performance somewhere else, and you can like travel around to different places, like do different performances, and it's really brilliant. And it's just a brilliant game. It's by the Bakers, because of course it is, because they're brilliant. Night Witch is also a good older game. Saga of the Icelanders is really interesting. Yeah, those are my recommendations. And then some things I can always use. I may always. What may I always do? I may always gesticulate.
Love that.
I may always equivocate. I can always oh, what an annoying playbook that would be, just too long. I can always I'm trying to resist the urge to make them all fit the pattern, and I think that would suck. I can always overthink it. I can always be open when someone expects me to be closed off. Counterpart, closed off when people expect me to open up. Those are my plays.
What a juicy playbook that would be.
Hey, you know, the poet is in Wanderhome. The poet is.
I need to figure out my things too. They're therapeutic.
We were talking. Yeah.
Okay. I'm so excited to learn what yours are.
We'll chat.
If you, as we close the interview, if you want to talk about any of your, I mean, you've talked about some of your recent stuff or coming up things.
Anything you want to pub?
And
Out in May?
Yes, probably.
Okay, I don't know if we'll have announced the Wanderhome expansion by then.
DLC!
So if we haven't announced the Wanderhome expansion, and
we'll cut it out if you
don't tell anyone. A little secret for your audience. You don't have to cut this part. We just
won't clip it.
And then, you know, I think hopefully by that point Wanderhome will be back in print. But check out my Patreon, patreon.com/Possum Creek. I can't really plug it on many sites because Patreon gets like links to Patreon get bumped down when you like try to post too much.
Right.
So like having on Twitter, I don't think it happens on Blue Sky, thank God. But like, hey, it's still hard to promote a Patreon. But if you listen to my thoughts and we're like, wow, this J Dragon feller, she sure is smart. Hey, maybe you should go like give me $1 a month or whatever, and then get all these thoughts beamed directly to your inbox, and also that would be nice. Check out my work. My other games are cool too. Sleepaway. Oh, y'all should play Sleepaway.
I have Sleepaway on my shelf.
Cool, great, good. Okay, I was like, oh wait, I think Sleepaway. I could endlessly nitpick my own art, but I think Sleepaway is still an interesting first game for me to put out. Anyway, yes, there we go. The pleasure. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on here. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Such a privilege to be able to talk to you and play your game. So that brings us to the end of the interview. Again, thank you for your time today. Your behind the scenes, eye-opening insight. Thank you to those listening as well. And we will see you, as always, at a different table. It's our little thing we say. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
What? I get embarrassed doing podcast stuff because it's like, and now welcome to
Well, no, I mean, you've got your little rituals, and then you have someone from outside of it, and then you're letting them see your little rituals.
Yeah.
I know. It's embarrassing.
Yeah. I get the same way whenever like I'm like trying to show one of my games to someone who I really respect. I'm like, okay, and this is the part where you ask where is your home, but you do it silently. I know it's like kind of crazy.
It's just like part of it, whatever.
Yeah, it's one of the little ritual things. Don't worry about it, you know.
Oh my god.